Well, welcome back. Experiencing some sort of psychological distress before COVID-19 infection can actually increase the risk of long COVID. That's according to a new study from Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health. Researchers found depression, anxiety, worry, perceived stress, and loneliness were associated with a more than 30% increased risk of long COVID. More than 17 million masks for BiPAP and CPAP machines have been recalled. The Food and Drug Administration says that Philips Respironics has recalled certain masks due to safety concern that involves magnets. 5 mask types are affected by the recall. We've posted exact product details with this story on KELOland.com.
Republicans are eyeing lawsuits to block President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. They call the plan an illegal overreach and abuse of power by the executive branch. Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley and Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley say they welcome lawsuits that try to stop the plan before it goes into effect this winter.
Would really be a tremendous win for the fight against inflation. It'd be a tremendous win against the unfairness that it brings to people that don't go to college.
But the White House contends the president is on solid legal ground. Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth says Republicans are wrong to try to undercut the relief.
Why would they want to keep this financial burden on the backs of so many young graduates and so many middle-class families?
No lawsuits have been filed yet, but the Attorney General of Arizona is hinting he and other AGs could take action soon. A local university is rolling out a new look. Today, the University of Sioux Falls announced a new logo and campaign message. The difference is here. The unveiling marked the school's 139th year. USF President Brett Bradfeld says the visual brand is changing. The school's mission remains the same.
We remain an institution that embraces accepting people where they are at and coming alongside of them in this faith and academic journey here at the University of Sioux Falls.
Bradfield says USF will gradually update its campus signage with its new logo starting on Monday.
Some new words are now in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, 370 words to be exact. They include pumpkin spice, sus, and yeet. Well, pumpkin spice is pretty self-explanatory. Sus and yeet, well, they may need a little context here. Sus.
Much from globalization, the way in which we earn our money, the way in which we live, and also when she came to the throne, it was a time of empire. That has crumbled into independence, and she became the Queen of Commonwealth. Really, throughout it, she has been the constant through these changing times. President Biden said she defined an era, and she did, the second half of the 20th century, the beginning of the 21st century, and really it's very hard to imagine a world without her. The second Elizabethan age has been such significant change, and she's always been such a constant through which, for her, she always emphasized that she was here as the people's servant.
A truly, truly remarkable woman. Batisha, even before she became queen, Elizabeth pledged to the British people that her life, quote, and I'm quoting her now, shall be devoted to your service. She lived that pledge, didn't she?
She absolutely did. We're being so sober, but I'm really feeling the undercurrent of respect and appreciation for that sense of sobriety and duty and acceptance. The crown is heavy, as we famously all know. It is a job. It's a job that the Queen was doing until the very day before her passing. She was appointing and acknowledging our latest UK Prime Minister, Liz Truss. So that's her level of industry commitment and dedication. Now, one of the dilemmas of being Queen, of course, is that you can't show your personal feelings. You can't get up in the morning and say, you know what? I'm going to take a personal day. She could never do that. She was always the Queen, and in fact, her entire day was subsumed by appointments under which she was really scrutinized every second. And in fact, because she couldn't speak out openly, everything she did, said, or wore was seen to be significant in some way. And to reign for 70-odd years and to weather so much political and personal and economic upheaval is amazing.
96 years old, 70 years as queen. Now, Tricia, this is someone who guided the UK through truly monumental change. What do you see as her legacy?
I see her legacy as her family, really. I know it seems quite fractured and what have you. I think the fact that Prince Harry is up there in Scotland as well, and I do think we're going to see a lot of innovative things from Prince Charles. In many ways, well, King Charles, I should say now. He recently co-edited the Voice, which is the black newspaper. He's done a lot with the Prince's Trust, for instance, and what have you. And I think that is because of the Queen being the backbone. I just want to point out how monumental it is that Putin, amongst everything that's going on, that Putin actually reached out and offered his condolences. I mean, if that doesn't show the power of the Queen in bringing people together, in looking forward to the future, in giving people grounding, I really don't know what does.
You know, let me follow up, Atisha, because for most of Britain's lives, the national anthem has been God Save the Queen. That now shifts to God Save the King. So what does this mean for the monarchy and for the country?
It means a huge deal. I was thinking just a moment ago, my goodness, they're going to have to change all the stamping of the profile on the coins. You're absolutely right. The national anthem is going to change. The very song that you have to memorize as a school kid, that's all going to change. There never has been any experience of there being any other monarch. What's extraordinary to me is that Queen's duty has been so long-standing that she's shuffled through prime ministers and presidents, and yet she always remains the same.
Good point indeed. All right, guys, thank you very, very much. Kate Williams, Tricia Goddard, Batisha Mamata. Appreciate it. Coming up, bells tolled to mark the passing of Britain's longest reigning monarch. We'll have a closer look at the life of Elizabeth II. That's next.
A monster was attacking, but the
insurance agent not found in contact.
Is really a good way to help reduce your weight, reduce your inflammation, and just overall generally feel better. And lastly, if you have any habits that you want to change, maybe tobacco or alcohol use, and you're looking to cut back or abstain, please come talk to your provider. We can help you set up a strategy to help you achieve those goals.
And for more ways to improve your health, head over to avera.org/medical minutes. We'll be right back.
Only one station offers over 6 hours of news daily. Get your news when you want it with Dakota News Now.
Dakota News Now is
chairwoman and Republican strategist. And finally, Brian Babylon, comedian, producer, and radio host. Panel, welcome to you all. So our first question, Queen Elizabeth, essentially the last world leader to die, as we know, from this greatest generation. Will we ever see this type of great unifier like Queen Elizabeth in our lifetimes? Jason, let's start with you.
I mean, the answer is yes. Of course, we'll see someone who's going to be a great unifier. Certainly, that's what we all would hope to see. I think what's important right now, especially the UK is experiencing this right now, is that with all the division, with all the rancor, with all the angry rhetoric, everyone right now, for the most part in the United Kingdom and really around the world, are coming together and celebrating her life and really exploring what she meant to the United Kingdom and how she was, in fact, someone who brought people together. And beyond that, of course, she did it without any complaints. This is someone who held this role for 70 years without complaining, was really about tradition and what this meant to the country. And so when you think about it in those perspectives, I think it can bring everybody together. Now we just got to hold on to that unity just for a little bit.
Everyone connected from wherever we
June to file a claim. Call now to see if you
reign over 70 years. I think it's a different generation. I think people feel far differently about the monarchy than they did when she first took the throne. And so I don't know. I think the future's up in the air. Maybe discord is the future, and maybe people are actually going to lean into that.
And Brian,
I actually think, too, that a lot of people are concerned, especially here in America, not that we
believe in a monarchy, but the fact that there's such dislike for King Charles now, there's concern that he's not going to be able to rule in the same manner as his mother. She was steadfast, she was level-headed, she also ruled, with a sense of humor. And I just don't know if he's going to be able to fill her shoes. And I know that's a major concern.
And Brian, before we get to you, I'd like to piggyback off what Amy just mentioned there. England, of course, our closest ally. Queen Elizabeth has had a good relationship with a dozen U.S. presidents, played a key role in the political life, obviously, of her own country. Do we think that now King Charles III can fill that role, Brian?
First of all, let's be real that the monarchy really is just for pomp and circumstance and really is not really ruling anything, first and foremost. I think that people are over this whole Disney sort of fantasy of having a monarchy, kings, queens, princesses, and stuff like that. And for me, I feel sorry for the royal family and their loss, but at the end of the day, the royal family, to a lot of people that I know, just represents, people taking things what they want. That's sort of Game of Thrones rules. You can't have a dynasty that the sun never set on the British Empire. You can't have that just with crumpets and tea. You have to take it. So I think in this new world, that will be.
But there are going to be changes that will be immediate, whether if she's just the face or if he's now just the face, because now you have the London Stock Exchange closed, which will affect their economy. You'll have, new money being printed immediately, and the passports have to be changed. So there are going to be some major changes that are undertaken immediately that will affect their economy.
Well, so let's piggyback now on something that Brian
that's
said,
not going to affect the economy at all.
Yeah,
I mean, look, at the end of the day, with all due respect, changing the money, changing the look of it, that doesn't actually do anything. And closing the economy down is not what's happening when you close down the stock market momentarily, because everyone is coming together to celebrate her life. So you're not going to see any sort of political shift at all. I think obviously part of the monarchy that we're talking about here, no offense, it's not Game of Thrones, but it is, in fact, more of just what they do. This is part of tradition. They don't hold the same kind of political power, certainly that historically they held.
If you have symptoms of this.
There's a lot of news tonight, and we have breaking news right now. Longtime Trump ally, Trump ally Steve Bannon has been indicted. This is the indictment. It lays out new charges against him in New York: money laundering, conspiracy, and trying to defraud MAGA and Trump donors. Bannon surrendered himself to New York State court authorities this morning.
Just a few minutes. We'll also have local reaction coming up at 10.
Now let's get one last check of our weather with Scott.
And in weather, we are looking at a cooler day tomorrow with periods of rain, showers, isolated thunder showers possible. Temperatures will hit the 60s and 70s for highs, though it will be cooler in Rapid City with a high of 59.
Thank you for joining us.
Have a great evening.
Tonight, the life and legacy of Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest-serving monarch, dies at the age of 96. The Queen passed peacefully at her Balmoral Castle in Scotland. The official announcement from Buckingham Palace. Her family rushing to be by her side, including her son, the new King Charles. CBS's Charlie DAKOTA is at Buckingham Palace as thousands gather to mourn.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built.
The unlikely queen, from a 19-year-old auto mechanic during World War II to her 70-year reign. CBS's Mark Phillips has her amazing life story.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service.
The global reaction. Condolences pour in from leaders around the world, and her iconic encounters with American presidents, first as princess, then as queen, dancing and riding through 70 years of history. And finally, the Queen's legacy. We talked to former Prime Minister John Major, and we look back at her life, not just as monarch, but mother, her devotion to her family.
This is the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us on this historic Thursday night. The world is mourning Queen Elizabeth II, who died this afternoon at the age of 96, surrounded by family at her summer home in Scotland. Earlier in the day, Buckingham Palace announced that Her Majesty, who ruled over the Commonwealth for a record 70 years, was placed under medical supervision. Her doctors were concerned about her health. Family rushed to her side. In accordance with the royal line of succession, her oldest son, Charles, immediately became king, which puts her grandson, Prince William, next in line to the throne, followed by William's eldest son, 9-year-old Prince George. Just before her death was announced, a double rainbow appeared over Buckingham Palace as a crowd gathered. President Biden visited the British Embassy in Washington late today and left a message in a condolence book. In a statement, he said Queen Elizabeth was a stateswoman of unmatched dignity and constancy who deepened the bedrock alliance between the United Kingdom and the United States. We have a team of reporters covering the death of a queen described as a stalwart leader, and CBS's Charlie DAKOTA will start us off from Buckingham Palace. And good evening, Charlie. What's the scene like there?
Okay. Good evening to you, Nora. There has been an outpouring of grief and emotion here at Buckingham Palace. Thousands of people have gathered to pay tribute despite the rain. And although this is a moment that we've all been expecting, it's hard to imagine this country without her. The official notice hung on the gates of Buckingham Palace in accordance with royal protocol. The Queen died peacefully in Balmoral this afternoon. Senior members of the royal family raced to be at her bedside today at Balmoral Castle, her summer home in Scotland. Prince Charles, now King Charles, was already there. Her grandson, Prince William, who came without Kate, and the Queen's other children made their way to the royal residence. Prince Harry traveled by himself and came later. Meghan remained behind in London. On the Queen's death, His Majesty, King Charles III, issued the statement, "We mourn profoundly the passing of a cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother." The new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, said the country is devastated.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built.
The Queen was last pictured meeting with the Prime Minister on Tuesday and standing on her own, smiling by the fire, cane in hand. The 96-year-old monarch was hospitalized last October, suffering from what the palace called episodic mobility problems, forced to cut back on most public engagements since, only appearing at a few of the events during her Platinum Jubilee, marking 70 years on the throne. She has slowed down considerably, appearing more frail in recent weeks with a significant weight loss. And the death of Prince Philip in April last year, her husband of more than 70 years, paid reminder that her reign was moving into its final, inevitable chapter. Tonight, the country mourns not just the passing of a national figure, but part of its very identity, the only monarch most have ever known. Now, the Queen is expected to remain in Scotland through the weekend before she's brought down here. King Charles will make his first televised address tomorrow and finalize the plans for his mother's funeral. Nora?
Charlie DAKOTA outside
of uncertainty after that rare detailed statement from the palace. The Queen's doctors, concerned for Her Majesty's health, recommended she remain under medical supervision. Her family racing to their matriarch's side. Charles arriving first by helicopter. Other members of the royal family flying into a foggy Aberdeen airport in Scotland. Prince William looking solemn, walking onto the tarmac. Driving Prince Andrew, Prince Edward, and wife Sophie, a grandson, sons, and daughter-in-law in grief. Their convoy seen speeding through the estate gates. Prince Harry traveling to Balmoral alone, arriving after the official announcement had been made. Both William and Harry without their wives. As shockwaves reverberated around the kingdom.
She was somebody I think that we'll never see again. I think a lot of people are really going to be sad, but also they'll be celebrating an amazing life and an amazing public servant.
Just 48 hours ago, these last images of the Queen, inviting Great Britain's new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, to form a government. Despite the decline in her health, still performing her constitutional responsibility. And still with that iconic twinkle in her eye. It was immediately after that event that doctors worried about her condition. The Queen celebrating 70 years on the throne this past summer.
Your Majesty, Mummy.
Her son Charles, now the King, expressing gratitude on behalf of the British people to his mother, the Queen.
As a nation, this is our opportunity to thank you and my father for always being there for us, for inspiring us with your selfless duty and service, and for making us proud to be British.
The chants ringing out. Tonight, the British people again thanking their Queen for 80% of the kingdom, the only monarch they've ever known.
Really powerful to see the crowds gathering outside Buckingham Palace today. Let's bring in Maggie Rulli. She's at Balmoral in Scotland for us tonight. And Maggie, walk us through what we know so far from the palace about what happens from here. Will Charles, as we know, he'll be known as King Charles III. When do we see him? Where does he go from here? When will the Queen be honored?
David, well, the palace has confirmed he will go by King Charles III. And we're hearing we should expect the king to travel to London to address the nation. This will be his first speech following his mother's death. Now, after 10 days of national mourning, it's expected her funeral will take place at Westminster Abbey. And David, those days of national mourning will really be a chance for the British public, who so many have gathered here at Balmoral and across the UK today already, to pay their respects and to honor the legacy of Queen Elizabeth.
So moving. Maggie Rulli leading us off tonight from Scotland. Maggie, thank you. Queen Elizabeth's life was above all one of duty and service, a commitment she honored to her people and to her family. Tonight, how it all began and what she promised as a young woman, keeping that promise until the very end.
She was a beacon of stability, her strength, her steady hand, deeply devoted to her role as queen for more than 70 years. Queen Elizabeth II, her life defined by duty and resilience. And this is what she said in 1947, still Princess Elizabeth, at just 21 years old.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
Her reign spanning 7 popes, 14 U.S. presidents, 15 prime ministers. Born in 1926, as a little girl, she couldn't pronounce her own name, calling herself Lilibet.
Princess Elizabeth.
She was a princess who never expected to rule. But when her uncle, King Edward VIII, gave up the throne to marry a divorced American, it was his brother, Princess Elizabeth's father, who became King George VI. And at 10 years old, Elizabeth was suddenly first in line to the throne. In a radio address during the war, still a princess, speaking directly to the country.
But in the end, all will be well, for God will care for us and give us victory and peace.
Taking a driving course at a training center is Princess Elizabeth. She has been learning to drive and maintain all types of motor vehicles.
She would volunteer during World War II as a driver and mechanic.
Wishing long life and happiness to Her Royal Highness and to her fiancé.
And after the war, she would marry Navy Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten. The world would know him as Prince Philip.
Take thee, Philip.
To my wedded husband.
To my wedded husband.
Their wedding, November 20th, 1947. She was 21, he was 26. Elizabeth had told her father Philip was the only man she could ever love. In 1952, the young couple was on a royal trip to Kenya. They climbed up into a treehouse where they would spend the night. And when she came down the next morning, she was queen. Her father had died, and it was Prince Philip who told his young wife she was now the queen.
The Lord clothe you with the robe of righteousness.
Her coronation in 1953 was the first ever televised and was watched around the world, reigning over 52 Commonwealth countries, covering 1/3 of the world's population, while raising her 4 children, too.
She set an incredible example to me, to others to follow. Her leadership, her duty, her sacrifice.
She was a constant on the world stage, the most traveled monarch in history, nearly 300 state visits, the first reigning monarch to visit Australia, China, Russia, and post-apartheid South Africa. She would entertain U.S. presidents, dancing with Gerald Ford, riding horses with Ronald Reagan, watching a ball game with George H.W. Bush, having high tea with the Clintons, attending state dinners alongside Prince Philip with President Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama. A master of diplomacy, she would navigate the monarchy through moments of joy, of sadness, and through great challenges, too. And the family moments on the world stage, the wedding of Prince Charles and Diana. Later, their divorce and Diana's death. It was the Queen who consoled.
What I say to you now, as your Queen and as a grandmother, I say from my heart. First, I want to pay tribute to Diana myself. She was an exceptional and gifted human being.
She was keenly aware of the times and would speak about the importance of modernizing the monarchy.
Institutions must continue to evolve if they are to provide effective beacons of trust and unity to succeeding generations.
In recent years, guiding her people through the COVID-19 pandemic.
We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
After 73 years of marriage, she would lose her husband, Prince Philip. That searing image, the Queen during COVID, seated alone during his service, wearing a mask. And this is what the Queen said about her husband back on their 50th wedding anniversary.
All too often, I fear Prince Philip has had to listen to me speaking. But he has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years.
She is survived by her 4 children, 8 grandchildren, a dozen great-grandchildren. And tonight, we remember what she said all those years ago.
I shall not have strength to carry out this resolution alone unless you join in it with me, as I now invite you to do. I know that your support will be unfailingly given. God help me to make good my vow, and God bless all of you who are willing to share in it.
Well, she certainly kept that vow, serving 70 years as Queen. And across the UK tonight, an emotional outpouring already underway. And that telling number.
Pharmacy box with our flea and tick meds. It's not peanut butter.
The peanut butter.
Commonwealth countries, that meant that sons and daughters of any future British monarch would have equal rights to the throne. And here in New York City, the Empire State Building will be lit in honor of the late Queen in purple and sparkle in silver to honor the life and legacy of Her Majesty. Brett?
Laura, thank you.
Thanks.
Changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace, playing the Star-Spangled Banner after 9/11 at the order of Queen Elizabeth II. The special relationship exemplified in music. Earlier, I spoke with former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo on the life and legacy of the Queen.
She sat across 7 decades as a force for stability, Brett. She was a rock. She did it with joy in her heart. I had the chance to just meet her one time. She always had that little turned up smile, but you knew behind that was someone who understood the sweep of history and United Kingdom and America's place in that history. She was never apologetic about her country. She was always proud of her kingdom and the people there, and she served in ways that I think few do. She
at a time when there were fewer women at those levels, presidential level meetings and such. Here she was with President Obama.
Mr. President, I firmly believe that the strength of our links and many shared interests will continue to ensure that when the United States and the United Kingdom stand together, our people and other people of goodwill around the world will be more secure and can become more prosperous.
You know, it's almost out of a different era. I'm curious, when you look at the period that she traversed, which we've touched on with multiple guests tonight, where does the British Empire's decline and evolution fit in? Where does its historical role, like the United States, with a foreign policy that is very controversial in many parts of the world, colonialism, post-colonialism, the debt it owes. We're here marking her life, and we know in the news when we do these obituary pieces, I mean, many great things have been said about her as a person. But she was also affiliated with a period of time where there was also many valid criticisms of British foreign policy and its long costs exerted on other nations and other peoples. Your thoughts on any of that? Again, having been London Bureau Chief.
I mean, absolutely. She was queen at came shortly after India had ceased to be a British colony. She was queen during the period of apartheid in South Africa. She, there were a lot of controversial, unfortunate, at times evil British government policies that were implemented at various times when she was during her reign. Now, she as queen did not set policy. To make that clear, I mean, at the opening of every parliament, she would read the address given to her by the prime minister, laying out the legislative program and laying out policies, and would read it verbatim. But so her job, in a sense, was in some ways to smooth the rough edges of those policies, to adjust as those policies did adjust. I mean, think of the diminution of Britain, frankly, on the world stage from the beginning of her life to the end. Britain was one of the unquestioned great powers of the world, and it is not now. It punches above its weight, in large part, because of the special relationship with the United States, but in no small measure because of the esteem in which she was held. She was kind of a secret weapon of British power that the Brits deployed at various times, and usually to their benefit. They will miss that. King Charles III, who is now the sovereign, it does not have the sort of universal goodwill that she had. She had no opinions. She never expressed opinions. He has opinions, some of which I would agree with, others of which I would disagree with. But the point is that you do know where he stands on certain issues, and some people won't like that. And so my question now going forward is not so much in the United Kingdom, but in places like Australia and Jamaica. How long are they going to still be down with this whole monarchy thing in an egalitarian age? They keep it as long as Elizabeth is queen. She's not queen now. Yeah. She has passed away. And so does the system survive in some of the important former colonies?
Yeah, I think those are big questions. This is a time, as we discuss all of this, that it comes up.
He has quite quite simply been my strength and stay all these years.
The marriage between Queen Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh is one of the great romances of the modern age. And in the very last year of his life, because of COVID, ironically, they were able to spend much more time together, and that was really a blessing.
The Queen's legacy will include leading her family and her country into a modern era.
She showed that, yes, you can be a mother, you can be a wife, but you can still be a woman in a position of power and influence.
And that legacy continues with 8 grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren, 4 of them born just last year. Nora?
Roxana Saberi, thank you so much. And we'll have more on Queen Elizabeth coming up, as well as the day's other headlines, including breaking news in the legal battle over documents seized at Mar-a-Lago.
My A1 flight replace.
Did you or a
food going to be a good choice to fuel my body for what I need to do?
Foundation through education and tennis program.
Choose Nariva Plus.
So they know nominations could be a lot more difficult if
as they sort of had to flee the violence. And
800-800-2088.
So I did some research and called Coventry Direct. They
and weight, you know, some of those very important traits.
He just likes to do ninja. In a high-scoring affair, Allen's goal
increases.
Lots of cars have backup cameras now.
Best. I also think we sometimes misunderstand the cues our body is giving us. Our body might be telling us we're thirsty, but we interpret that as we're hungry. So drinking more water can also help reduce weight if you are overeating. Now, there are certain health conditions where people are on fluid restrictions. So if that applies to you, talk to your doctor about this first. But otherwise, healthy nutrition is really a good way to help reduce your weight.
Emotion with
Haspin. Raul Gajalva, who's a key committee.
Scott Marks.
Major system or appliance breakdown, bust your budget, or go.
She was crying on the phone because the Queen has been a huge part of her life and everyone's life. We've all grown up with her, so yeah, very sad indeed.
She led this country with great reverence and duty and respect and honor, and I just don't know if there will be another like her.
Mourners outside Buckingham Palace today as Queen Elizabeth II dies. Meantime, Charles becomes king. Bloomberg writes it this way: he faces a nation changes. Next 2 weeks will be a jolt for a country accustomed to being ruled by the same monarch for more than 70 years. Longer than 85% of the population have been alive. Charles will now have to steer the near immutable institution of monarchy in a country that has altered beyond recognition since his mother's ascension. His kingdom faces potential breakup as Scotland presses for independence and an uncertain position in the world after leaving the European Union. Let's bring in our panel. Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist, former Education Secretary Bill Bennett, and Morgan Ortegas, former State Department spokesperson. Bill, let me start with you. The legacy of the Queen and what we just heard there from Bloomberg.
A lot of lessons. You know, we're having some problems getting some of our young men to work these days. This woman worked for 70 years in the service of her country. One thing that was said today I liked is that maybe the world, certainly England, maybe the world lost its grandmother. You know, Shakespeare says some are born great, some achieve greatness, some have greatness thrust upon them. I think she had all three. But let's also pay attention to that very human side. I love the stories of her having been trained as a mechanic, and then when the cars or trucks would break down on the way to the country estates, she would get under the car and the hood and try to fix things. That was her training. There is a story, Brett, that I heard and I confirmed with Jim Baker, that when President Reagan visited with her, they're both good riders, horsemen, and they were riding up a steep hill, and a loud blast of gas came out of one of the horses. And the Queen said to Ronald Reagan, "Excuse me, Mr. President." And Ronald Reagan said, "Oh, fine, Your Majesty, I thought it was the horse." He reports that a smile came over her face. This was a very interesting human being. Longevity matters. Longevity does matter.
Leslie, the British Prime Minister, new Liz Truss, called the Queen a huge rock on which modern Britain was built.
Absolutely. My best friend lives in London, and I spoke to her earlier today. A couple of things here. One, there are two words that keep coming up with leaders all over the world, in our country as well: dignity and decency. And I think that the world wants that, embraces that in a leader, whether it be a president, a prime minister, or certainly their monarch, their queen. I heard a beautiful story on BBC earlier today. A man said that his mother, who has Alzheimer's and can't remember anything, when she was watching on television and heard Queen Elizabeth had passed, she started crying because she knew Queen Elizabeth and she remembered her. The son said the only thing that his mother could remember from her past, because this woman is the only monarch, the only queen, the only leader that most people in that nation have ever known.
And now it will be King Charles III. And Morgan, his statement said, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family. We mourn profoundly in the passing of cherished sovereign and a much-loved mother. I know her loss will be deeply felt throughout the country, the realms, and the Commonwealth, and by countless people around the world." He has his hands full as he takes over as king.
You know, when you look at what she faced as queen, you looked at everything that she did with the United States, defeating and looking at the Nazis, World War II, the rise of the Soviet Union, terrorism. The United Kingdom, under her leadership, has been a steadfast and loyal ally and loyal friend. I think in Proverbs 18, there's a friend that sticks closer than a brother, and I think that's what we saw in the relationship with Queen Elizabeth, and what we all hope we get out of this next monarch, and of course the new prime minister. And it is scary times that we are all entering together, but she certainly has been an example of a female leader that me and many other women admire and look up to.
Well, thank you all.
Corgis and horses, her greatest devotion was to the service of the Commonwealth, even in her final days working to welcome the new prime minister. Frail but smiling broadly. In her long life, she no doubt saw her fair share of tumult and triumph, but she will always be remembered for her strength on the world stage, as iconic and stable as Buckingham Palace itself. And that is tonight's CBS Evening News. We'll see you tomorrow night from London. Good night.
And I actually cried.
For more than 20 years, Shaw was the face of CNN and trusted news around the world.
Always steady, always solid, always trusted, and that to me is going to be his legacy. It was the "you can count on him" brand.
But that public trust came with a personal cost. Shaw said he sacrificed precious time away from his wife and 2 children and suffered PTSD from his time in Baghdad.
You pay a price. I happen to believe it's a worthwhile price to pay, but you're going to pay a price.
It was the price of being a witness to history and the privilege of being trusted to report it.
You can depend on us being here all the time. And please, pass the word.
Bernie leaves behind his wife, Linda, and 2 children. Our deepest, deepest condolences to the family. May he rest in peace, and as we say, may his memory be a blessing. Thanks very much for watching. Aaron Burnett picks up our special coverage of the death of Queen Elizabeth right now.
Monday Night Football.
stadium right outside.
Consideration, especially if you live in the country.
The next 2 years. And today, the celebration continues with the unveiling of the championship banner, giving the fans even more to cheer about. Now, after a dream first year in LA, Matthew Stafford got paid, as did the perennial All-Pro Aaron Donald, despite those reports that he might walk away from the game. But not everybody is back. Von Miller left for Buffalo and tonight makes his Bills debut against his former team. Meanwhile, his quarterback, Josh Allen, is entering year 5 with expectations sky high. It's the Super Bowl champs against the Super Bowl favorites, the Rams against the Bills, and the 2022 NFL kickoff presented by Verizon on NBC. Hi everyone, I'm Maria Taylor, and it was just 207 days ago that just a short walk from here, the Rams were able to lift that Lombardi trophy after their big comeback win over the Bengals in Super Bowl 56. Now today, they start their quest to become the first team to go back-to-back in nearly 2 decades. But before they do, tonight's also about a little celebration. So in a little over an hour, just behind me, the Rams are gonna unveil their franchise's second ever Super Bowl banner. Now that comeback against Cincinnati back in February was also capped off by a short touchdown pass from Stafford to Cooper Kupp. All the Rams fans, they remember it. There was less than a minute and a half to go. And just steps away from that very spot, our superstar players, Tony Dungy and Rodney Harris.
Heart beating. So we can tell when there's a child unattended in that vehicle, no matter how they got there.
Another option for about $50 is an
Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. Those were the simple words from Buckingham Palace describing the passing of an extraordinary woman. Elizabeth II, the longest-serving monarch in Britain's history, died at her estate in Scotland with her 3 sons, her daughter Anne, and grandson William there. Her oldest son is now King Charles III. The Queen's life spanned nearly a century, 70 years of which she spent on the throne. Thousands began to gather outside Buckingham Palace in London, and an official period of mourning and commemoration in Britain has begun. The newly confirmed Prime Minister Liz Truss, who was officially invited by the Queen personally just 2 days ago to form a government, spoke this evening outside number 10 Downing Street.
The death of Her Majesty the Queen is a huge shock to the nation and to the world. Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her.
Now, William Brangham has this look back at her remarkable reign.
She was born Princess Elizabeth Alexandra Mary on April 21, 1926, far down the line of royal succession and largely out of the spotlight. That changed radically in 1936. Her grandfather, King George V, died, and within months, her uncle, Edward VIII, abdicated. This abrupt turn of events meant that Elizabeth's father became King George VI, and the princess was elevated to heir apparent.
The princess wished them all the best of luck and success in future operations.
As she grew into a young woman, she began taking on public service roles during World War II. And in 1947, she married Lieutenant Philip Mountbatten, a one-time prince of Greece and Denmark. Their ceremony was held at Westminster Abbey with some 2,000 in attendance. 5 years later, Elizabeth's life changed suddenly again when King George died.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family.
Her Majesty, looking radiant in her wonderful gown, leaves the palace.
And so, at the age of 25, she ascended to the British throne. The coronation of Queen Elizabeth took place amid great pomp and circumstance, an event broadcast to the world on television for the very first time.
Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the peoples of the United Kingdom of Great Britain?
I solemnly promise so to do.
In those early years, the Queen and her husband, now the Duke of Edinburgh, started a growing family. Firstborn was Charles, the Prince of Wales, and heir to the throne. Then Anne, the Princess Royal, followed later by Prince Andrew, Duke of York, and Prince Edward, Earl of Wessex. Along with motherhood, the Queen also aimed to be a modern monarch and kept a busy public schedule for decades.
I would like the whole American people, north, south, east, and west, to know how happy we are to be here.
She met with world leaders at home and abroad and traveled extensively. One such visit brought her to the U.S. in 2007, while then-President George W. Bush was in the White House.
It is the moment to take stock of our present friendship, rightly taking pleasure from its strengths, while never taking these for granted. And it is the time to look forward, jointly renewing our commitment to a more prosperous, safer, and freer world.
The Queen also carried out an endless variety of ceremonial duties and was a patron of more than 600 organizations and charities, from child welfare to environmental conservation. Through it all, she tried to keep her family's personal life largely out of the public eye, but the effort was increasingly in vain. In 1983, an intruder broke into Buckingham Palace and confronted the Queen in her bedroom. And in 1992 came a series of tabloid scandals. Tensions in the marriage between her son, Prince Charles, and Princess Diana broke open with reports that both were having affairs. The Queen's second son, Prince Andrew, announced his separation from Duchess Sarah Ferguson, and Princess Anne divorced her husband, Captain Mark Phillips. Finally, in November that year, a fire destroyed historic sections of the royal residence, Windsor Castle. That same month, the Queen reflected on what she called the horrible year.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure. In the words of one of my more sympathetic correspondents, it has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
Reports of the Queen's contentious relationship with Princess Diana continued. Charles and Diana divorced in 1996 after having two sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. 1 year later, Diana was killed in a car crash in Paris, leaving a nation in shock. Amid an outpouring of public grief, Elizabeth drew criticism for waiting a week before issuing a statement on the tragedy. She also objected to Charles's relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, but when they married in 2005, she held a reception for them at Windsor Castle. Ultimately, the Queen's popularity recovered, both at home and around the world. She became known as a devoted grandmother and later great-grandmother. And perhaps even better known for her colorful suits and hats, and for her love of dogs, especially the corgis who seemed never far away. Britain celebrated the Queen's Diamond Jubilee in 2012, marking the 60th anniversary of her rule with ceremonies, concerts, and a maritime parade featuring more than 1,000 vessels riding down the Thames River. 3 years later, in September 2015, she officially became Britain's longest-reigning monarch, surpassing her great-great-grandmother, Queen Victoria, who ruled for 63 years. And the weddings of her grandsons, William in 2011 and Harry in 2018, once again brought an outpouring of affection for the royal family. Through it all, Elizabeth urged her people to aspire to the good and to practice kindness, as in her pre-recorded Christmas message in 2016.
We sometimes think the world's problems are so big that we can do little to help. On our own, we cannot end wars or wipe out injustice. But the cumulative impact of thousands of small acts of goodness can be bigger than we imagine.
The Queen herself tried to stay active, even at an advanced age. But in late 2016, Buckingham Palace announced she was cutting back on her appearances and her work for a number of charities. She also faced new personal turmoil when Prince Harry and his wife Meghan, who is half black, renounced their royal duties and said Meghan had been subjected to racism within the royal family. The couple ultimately moved to California. And in April of 2021, Prince Philip, the Queen's husband of nearly 75 years, died just short of his 100th birthday. Elizabeth herself slowed down markedly during 2022, the platinum jubilee of her 70 years on the throne. She missed some of the anniversary events and was said to have difficulty getting around. But in one of her final acts, the Queen did meet with Liz Truss to formally request that Truss become the 15th Prime Minister of her long reign. Queen Elizabeth II was 96 years old.
Just amazing. And this grace note before we move on. This afternoon, shortly after the Queen's death was announced, a sparkling rainbow broke out and arced over London and Buckingham Palace. And now from London, late in the evening there, I'm joined from just outside the palace by special correspondent Willem Mark. So Willem, tell us about the events of today.
Well, Judy, leaving aside the rainbow, we heard at around lunchtime here in the UK that Elizabeth's doctors were concerned about her health and placed her under medical supervision. Several hours later, Buckingham Palace issued a statement saying that she had passed away peacefully at Balmoral, her Scottish estate. Over the course of the afternoon, all 4 of her children were either with her or en route to be with her, as were several of her grandchildren. And it made it, therefore, slightly compelling to see that they were there at the end of her very long life. Now, here, in the hours before that announcement, there were crowds already gathering. They're still here late into the evening, Judy. Many thousands of people, many of the streets nearby closed off by police. Every so often you'll hear a rendition of the national anthem start to break out amongst groups of people here, with, of course, the words changed from God Save the Queen, an anthem that British people have known for 70 years now, to God Save the King, to celebrate the new King, Charles III.
And Willem, we know that there's much to come in the days ahead. Tell us a little about what the palace has planned.
Well, of course, you might imagine, Judy, that the specific details of the funeral have been worked on for many, many years. The palace have not quite released the timetable around that, but because she's passed away in Scotland, her body will be taken from Balmoral, about 40 miles west of the city of Aberdeen, to the capital there, Edinburgh. There'll be a service of some kind in the main cathedral there, St. Giles, before the body is taken by a special train service all the way south back down to London. One imagines there'll be thousands of mourners lining the track at major station crossings throughout the course of that journey. And when she arrives back here in Buckingham Palace, she will once again lie in state in the throne room in the building behind me, guarded by 4 members of a British Army regiment, the Grenadier Guards. Following that, there will be a funeral. We don't yet know the exact date, and of course, there will be a formal proclamation that Charles is now the king. And I should say that across the nation there will be tolling of bells. Many of the masts, like the one behind me, will be flying half-mast, many of the flags, for many days. There'll be 10 days of national mourning, a month of mourning in the court. Members of the royal family and their staff wearing black armbands. Royal Palace is closed, and many other businesses here facing a national public holiday.
Well, clearly so much tradition, but such a personal outpouring. It's just a tremendous tribute to see. Willem Marks joining us tonight from outside Buckingham Palace. Thank you, Willem. And we know one of the Queen's favorite homes was Windsor Castle, north of London. Malcolm Brabant.
I think it's going to be interesting to see if that's a permanent change or a temporary change. What we do see is people, slightly more Brits than not, say that they are actually hesitant to build new coal or to extend the life of coal-powered plants. But what they really don't want, what we really see them negative on, is paying more for energy or rationing energy. So it's clear if you look at a list of what they prefer and what they would really be averse to, that paying more is at the very bottom of the list.
Right. So, I mean, everybody cares about being green until you tell them what it's going to cost, whether it be out of your pocket or out of rationing, which is obviously what's happening in California because of climate policies, and suddenly it changes. I'm wondering how long till we see sort of the effects. If the UK sometimes is a few years ahead of the US economically, we've seen that happen in the past. With a couple of recessions, how long should we wait to figure out whether this works?
Well, I think it's hard to compare the U.S. and the U.K. The U.S. has the incredible advantage that we're a net exporter of energy. And unfortunately, most of our European friends and allies are not. And unfortunately, they are in some ways at the mercy of Russia and its gas exporting infrastructure. And, you know, even though the UK, as you said, has some gas assets in the North Sea, they're still part of the broader European market. So they're going to feel that pain along with their European neighbors.
All right. Hey, good to see you, Sonnet. Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
Have a good one.
I am establishing a new office within the department.
But if you want sauce, it's in the bag. Arby's, we have the meat.
In the 1980s, we've seen more recently films like The Queen and the series The Crown. And she's never had a sort of right of rebuttal. She was never able to say anything in her defense. And we've also most recently seen her humor, as we did, of course, at the Platinum Jubilee with the scene with Paddington and pulling the sandwich out of her handbag. So I think that television has given us an insight into her life at the same time as allowing her to be very publicly maligned.
And indeed, and I just have to show this because it is sort of dramatic, the world that changed in the time that I really wish we had more time. This is the British Empire in 1945. When Elizabeth was crowned in 1952, Britain had a massive empire. It was more than 70 overseas territories. And then by 2015, you can see the reduction in just the scope and size to almost nothing. And I wonder how you feel about her having to preside over that massive change in what the British Empire was.
I think this is why we have to accept that the Queen means different things to different people, okay? And this is important to note. Now, and just as you mentioned earlier, Joy, that because at the time she came into, became a queen, she became queen of the British Empire, and the British Empire was a colonizing empire, which made her a colonizer queen, right? Just as right now, she's revered as a global leader because she's the head of state of the United Kingdom, which is recognized as a global power. And I think two things can be true. And in the part of her legacy is that colonization, it is the atrocities that were committed in the name of Queen or country during the colonizing period. And yes, many countries fought hard. Many of them, many lives were lost, people imprisoned, even tortured, in order to be set free from Britain's colonization, so to speak. And she was the queen during that time. So for a number of people, while people are trying to be respectful of her passing, because I'm respectful of her passing, I can respect her sense of duty, but what I cannot do is to look at her legacy through rose-tinted glasses, and I don't think that would be right to do. I don't think that would make any sense. It's definitely not consistent with who I am. I think that in order for us to fully encapsulate a legacy, it is important for us to understand the history, the legacy, what she did, what she did not do, what she failed to do. So for a lot of people, if she, like me, if she had led by being vocally visible against racial injustice and inequality in Britain and addressed both historical and present-day systemic racism, she would have had a lot of legitimacy and credibility in a number of nations, including those that still have her head of state, moving her as head of state. So I think this is all part of it.
Let me give Ms. Lipscomb the last word on this. What do you think overall, given how complex the legacy of the crown is, that her legacy will ultimately be?
Well, I absolutely respect what's being said about the British Empire and colonization. I think, though, that actually, if we were to really look to what the Queen's legacy has been, it's been the creation of the Commonwealth, which has been an institution that has been about people being equal and about creating alliances and professional associations. And I think that she has, it's the Commonwealth, in fact, that spoke out against, for example, apartheid, or challenged a number of sort of practices in the 1970s, but particularly that were ones that were negative towards people of colour, and so I feel like that actually the Commonwealth has been an institution for good, and that if we were to put her name to anything, it's been presiding over the decolonisation, the post-imperial world, and that was the institution of which she was most proud, and it wouldn't have got off the ground without her.
Susanna Lipscomb, Shola Mas Shogbamimu, thank you both very much. And up next on the readout, she met 13 sitting U.S. presidents, 13 of them. Queen Elizabeth's special relationship with the United States is next, after this.
Wish life was spill-proof? Start with spill-proof floors. Save big and pay no interest on tons of styles that look great and
daily tablet that treats CKD differently than type 2 diabetes medication.
In Heidi One-Step Potato Continuity, when she lived through the abdication crisis.
Every search and why the crime. He was also seen fleeing away in a maroon-colored GMC. You take, I'll be watching. Done it. In a nutshell. Don't miss.
As exciting as nutter.
KSFY knows Saturday's game will have a little extra juice to it because of that.
I think they felt the same way going into the playoff game after the first game of last year. Right now, they're a really good football team, and as we look at our conference race, this is a big part of it right now. We want to be undefeated at home again, but it starts with winning the first one. I think there'll be a little bit of residuals from last year because both of us have quite a few players coming back off our roster that played in that game.
Augustana and Bemidji State will meet Saturday at 1:05. You can watch that game live on KELO Extra and the CW of the Black Hills along with our website. And you can also see a full conversation with Coach OJ up on our website now. And then tonight at 10, we're going to introduce you to safety Eli Weber, who's established himself as one of the best defensive players in the country.
Thanks, Sean. Well, it may be hot today in eastern KELOland, but tomorrow and into the weekend could be a very different story. Stay with us.
My favorite feature over at Beds by Design is absolutely the adjustable beds. I work a lot on my laptop. If I'm on a flat bed, I strain myself. With an adjustable bed, it already holds me up, and it just makes it all around a better experience.
I really didn't feel like our bank was watching out for our best interests and our business's needs, and we knew it was time for a change. AB&T is different. I would say that they exceed all expectations.
You can't control everything in business, but when it comes to banks, you're in charge.
I know AB&T is going to have our back.
Make the move today to American Bank and Trust. Choose your change at abt.bank.
Get back to your glory days with limitless male testosterone replacement. As you age, you lose important hormones.
Says the one and only true legend of this country, an inspiration to myself and to my family. This one says, I am sad by your passing. You've been a constant in my life. I am sure, though, Charles will look after us. So some reassuring things there. You know, I could be here all day reading to you, but the things that really stand out, these two say, thank you for your service, thank you for your service. Duty and service are the words that you hear over and over again. Here's what some people told me earlier today.
She's brought the country through some real tough times. She served herself during the war, you know, and she's everything that's British.
The Queen was everything I've grown up with. She was iconic. She was.
I was called Sally Elizabeth because I was born in the year of the coronation. It will be very, very, very difficult being without her. We all loved her very much.
So really, it struck me, Aaron, by how much genuine emotion that people were feeling, especially British people who don't tend to show a lot of emotion. They also don't tend to show a lot of overt patriotism, perhaps, you know, and yet the monarchy seems to be their one unifying factor, their excuse to be patriotic. You don't see a lot of Union Jacks on people's houses, and yet when it comes to big royal events, suddenly they all come out. The Queen undoubtedly has been a unifying figure for this country across political divisions, across the four nations of this country. And so now the challenge falls to Charles to be that same kind of unifying force in this country, Aaron.
All right, thank you so much from Windsor. And I want to bring in Darren McGrady now because he served as personal chef to Queen Elizabeth and her family for 15 years. And Darren, I'm sorry for your loss. This is personal for you. You traveled the world with the Queen and her family for more than a decade. What do you remember most about her?
You know, as if I lost a loved one, and I think the whole nation feels the same, and everyone around the world. You know, I got to see the Queen for all those years in pomp and pageantry, but also behind the scenes too, their happy smiley faces. And I'm just thinking back today to, you know, when I first met her, walking the corgis along the river at Balmoral Castle, and the corgis chasing me running away, the Queen just laughing out loud, you know, seeing her, dancing with her at Balmoral, and just seeing the happy times, you know, those years where I cooked breakfast, lunch, afternoon tea and dinner for the most amazing lady.
You call her the most amazing lady, and you talk about her humor. It has been, you know, amidst the sadness and the seriousness of today, some of the stories of her humor have truly, you know, would make anyone laugh. I mean, what a wonderful sense of humor she had. You know, she had access to anything she wanted, right? Anything she wanted. You saw that, of course, with food. You're cooking breakfast, lunch, tea, dinner, anything. And but you say she wasn't a foodie. What was it like to work for her, to cook for her?
Yeah, when I first started working at the palace, I thought, this is it. We're going to be having champagne and caviar and foie gras every night. But that wasn't the case. You know, the Queen is very humble, and she is quite happy just doing a state banquet where we have to have all those rich foods on the menu when she's entertaining kings, queens, presidents from around the world. I cooked for 5 different presidents, Reagan, Clinton, Ford, both Presidents Bush, while I was there. But when she was on her own, just some grilled fish, grilled chicken, and she was never happier than when she was actually eating something from her own garden, some vegetables, some that her and Princess Margaret had picked from the cages at Balmoral Castle. That's when she was happy.
And you were also Princess Diana's former personal chef for several years until her tragic death. I know you had many moments with her. You know, you held infant Prince Harry while Diana ate cereal in the kitchen. What was that like? How was working for her? And I know, of course, it would have been quite different from working with the Queen.
Yeah, it did cross my mind today, you know, when I'm seeing all of these photographs of the flowers building up outside Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace. You know, I was the princess right up until the day of the car accident. I had food with me, waiting for her to return the next day, and seeing outside the front of Kensington Palace 25 years ago, those flowers building up and the people out there all through the night. This is just memories of 2 people that, you know, created a difference in the world and touched so many people.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate your taking the time and sharing your experience. So unique, such a window into somebody. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you.
And next, the British Prime Minister
than if they hit their mom. And our criminal justice system, with these soft-on crime groups over the last 2 decades, passing all this touchy-feely stuff on criminals, trying to rehab them, has not made our community safer. You got to hold people accountable for their actions, and they have to serve every single day.
Do you have the money to do that? I think about the budget right now. The Department of Corrections is 3% of the state budget, $1.1 billion. Are you going to be able to lock enough people up in Tennessee? And one of the reasons these people are getting out early is because you need room in the prisons.
Well, I mean, when you looked at when they went soft on crime 2 decades ago, when they redid the sentencing laws here in Tennessee before I got here, they used the excuse that we had too many people in prison, and they let all these people out. They made it easier to get out. They made bond easier. The The number one job of government, in my opinion, is to protect the public. Spend more money and build more prisons to do that. That's what we should do. Someone should not be afraid to get out in the morning and go jog, have their kids walk home from school, pump gas, or as in the case that you mentioned for Kelly, walk into the AutoZone to buy something and get shot.
Fair enough. You make a good point. 2 decades of sort of trial and error in Tennessee has gotten us where we are. We've seen what's happened in Memphis. It's gone from this beautiful and charming and exciting city back when I visited, actually just about 20 years ago, to now this cesspool of...
As it continues to unfold, and our hearts go out to the Germain family. We love investigative journalism. We don't care where, left, right, doesn't matter. We like it, and this should have never happened. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jesse.
Joe Biden called all Republicans fascists, but do they even know what that means?
So there are many things to say about the royal family and about monarchy and about the British Empire, but that chapter is unsullied, I believe. The other thing that I find so fascinating is she spoke to our politics in this indirect way. But just because something's indirect doesn't mean it's not real. I want to read you one thing, if I may, from
Sure.
This is the night she became queen, the coronation in 1953, at the recommendation of Winston Churchill, who was in his second prime ministership. During the McCarthy era in the United States, 1953, this is a year and a half before McCarthy is censured. This is what she said on the night she became queen. Parliamentary institutions, with their free speech and respect for the rights of minorities, and the inspiration of a broad tolerance in thought and expression, all this we conceive to be a precious part of our way of life and outlook. It was an affirmation of an imperfectly realized, but persistently argued and pursued Anglo-American tradition of human liberty. And Lord knows, in the 21st century, when so many illiberal forces are on the march, we can heed those words with profit.
Yeah, amen. Absolutely. John Meacham, always a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Really appreciate you. We're back after this.
So how many vaccines?
Meltdown. They call that island mode because the plant is effectively disconnected from the Ukrainian grid. I talked about that and so many of the nuclear fears here. With the president of Ukraine's state energy authority, Energoatom, Petro Kotin, in Kyiv yesterday.
Petro Kotin, thank you very much. Welcome to the NewsHour.
Thank you for having me.
How concerned are you today about the risk of a nuclear disaster?
I'm very concerned about the operation of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and actually we have very severe situation in there because we do not have any connection of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to the Ukrainian grid. All lines which connect the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant to the grid are damaged at the moment, so there is no electricity coming in or out of the plant.
Is the Russian goal, you believe, to disconnect the plant from the Ukrainian grid and redirect the power from Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant into Russia?
It was actually their original goal when they started all this shelling, and now they achieved this goal. The plant is completely disconnected from Ukrainian grid.
Can you fix the lines that go from the power plant to the rest of Ukraine?
Yes, we are trying to do that, and not all lines can be repaired at the moment because some of them are under heavy shelling. This is the question of negotiations between military commanders from Ukrainian side and from Russian side.
How important do you believe is it that the output of the plant get repaired before the winter?
This plant is very important for us, and actually 7 months ago we operated all 6 units during winter period. So if we don't have the plant in winter, then it will be a very severe period for Ukrainian energy system.
Has Russia already severed all of the lines that go into the plant to provide the plant electricity?
All lines at the moment are broken. This is viable for the plant to survive, actually. For cooling of nuclear material, and it is to be cooled constantly. You cannot just stop cooling for 1 minute or for 2 minutes. It should be cooled all the time.
That's basically what happened in Fukushima. The plant lost the source of electricity.
It was like an earthquake at Fukushima, and they lost all external power supply, like it is at Zaporozhye right now.
Right now, the plant's only source of power is one of its own reactors. Right. Is that sustainable?
As far as I know, it is the first time in the history this type of reactor is operated in such a mode.
The bottom line is that it is not sustainable, right? Between generators or this reactor providing its own electricity, it's just not designed to do that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When Mr. Grossi was being led around on the power plant, we saw an official from Rosatom being the tour guide, essentially. What's the presence of Russian civilian officials, and what are they doing?
There are about 10 to 15 persons. They are like spies who does not understand anything in nuclear, and this just crazy situation completely.
Let's talk about the physical risk to the plant. The plant is built to withstand a lot of physical damage, but are you concerned about the physical damage from military action actually creating a spread of radiation?
This type of reactor is to withstand even airplane which is coming, but still if you do it intentionally and continuously, if you have these intentions in your crazy mind and your crazy head, then you can finally actually break everything, every protection.
But do you believe that's what Russia wants to do, or no, it wants to keep the plant intact in order to redirect the output to Russia?
Yeah, if they want to blackmail all the world. Right now, we more or less understand what they want. They want just to ruin our economy. The second is to reconnect it to their system. That is their goals.
Petro Kotin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A PBS NewsHour NPR Marist poll is out today, providing a new snapshot on how Americans view the economy and the upcoming midterm elections, now just 61 days away. Lisa Desjardins is here to break down the numbers. Hello. Lisa, so first of all, what are Americans saying about how they see the economy?
One thing you'll see with all these numbers, some questions matter more than others right now. We started with a simple one to gauge what people think about the economy. Is the U.S. in a recession now? Here is what we got from respondents of all ages.
Like you can't.
Easy to think that all money managers are pretty much the same.
Hear his speeches with anybody. Now he is going to be in a national institution, and he's going to have to live by some fairly rigid rules. He's only going to be able to give 2 speeches a year. Christmas broadcast and the Commonwealth Day speech. They're the only ones that he will be able to give on his own. He'll have to have a more efficient office. There are a lot of things he's going to need to do. He'll really, in effect, have to operate on a different gauge from what he has been. But he's up to it. He's aware. He's been tutored very closely by his mother, and he knows that he needs to be a healer and a unifier.
And you know, Christopher, there had been talk, right, in recent years that perhaps because of how long the Queen had reigned, that there would be, that somehow that they would break with tradition, that Charles would say, well, I will abdicate, I want to send this, to my son. Obviously that's not happening. They are staying with tradition, but you have spent so much time writing about William and Harry. William is now going to be the Duke of Cornwall. He's expected to become the Prince of Wales if his father, gives him that, bestows upon him that title. What are we going to see from William now and from Kate?
Well, and I have to tell you, you're breaking up on my end. I'm in Stockholm, Sweden, and we're not getting such great Wi-Fi here. But I think you asked me about the impact on William.
Yes, William and Kate, yes.
Yes, well, if anybody was, Sally talked earlier about how it has been instilled in Charles, particularly as an adult, duty and obligation and a sense of the monarchy and being such a great symbol of the nation. actually a global symbol. But, you know, when Charles was a child, the Queen was very busy. She was a young mother, and she didn't have enough time really to spend with him. He's written about it. You know, she was more aloof in the 50s. I'm Charles's age. I know that that's quite possible for a working mom, maybe to be a little less hands-on. So she didn't instill in him as a young man those sensibilities, but she did that, as many grandparents do, with her grandchildren, with her grandson, specifically William. I mean, from a very young age, she would invite, and I'm saying 5, 6 years old, she would invite William to Windsor Castle. They would have chats, they would have tea, and she would sneak in little history lessons. And she really paid attention to the kind of king William would some way be. And I think that's what we're going to see. It's just remarkable to me that she has left the monarchy in a better state than I would have ever dreamt it after the death of Diana, because we cannot forget that was a moment in history when the monarchy was in serious jeopardy, and the people were not so pleased with it.
Yeah. And Sally, one more question. Of course, Prince Harry was there today. He was not there before she died, but arrived soon after. Meghan Markle was not there, but they've given up their royal titles. Their role seems to be, there's a little bit of chaos and disarray around that. Let's just be blunt. They're estranged from King Charles, such that we understand it. What happens to them now?
Well, I mean, unless there's some miraculous reconciliation that's taken place at Balmoral Castle, I think they'll probably continue to do what they're doing. And it's really a shame because at this moment, Harry and Meghan could have been enormously valuable members of the royal family, and every one of their advisors was working with them to try and make that happen. They could have been a huge help to Harry's father.
All right, thank you both very much. And next, Queen Elizabeth met with 13 different presidents in her life. 13. What made those bonds so strong? David Gergen met the Queen, and he is next. Plus a major move by the Justice Department. The DOJ tonight with the appealing the ruling on a special master in the Mar-a-Lago Trump investigation.
Fitter.
2 B's.
This 36-hour trip. For some, the journey began months earlier. They carry with them everything they have left.
So it's just past 6:15. The group's basically been divided into a few subsections. People who have no contacts or family here in the United States. We're walking with them right now. They're going to be moved to a shelter facility here in the DC area. And then a smaller group of folks who say they do have some family or friends that they're looking to reconnect with here in the US. They've been taken to another area to see if they can make those connections.
For 5 months now, Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott has been offering migrants arriving in his state free bus rides to Washington, D.C., a political message aimed at the president.
Joe Biden has refused to come to the border to see the chaos that he has created by his open border policies, so we're going to take the border to him.
Arizona Governor Doug Ducey followed suit in May, saying these bus trips are necessary because of, quote, little action or assistance from the federal government. The two governors argued their states have long borne the burden of rising numbers of people attempting to cross the southern border, numbers now at record highs. U.S. officials reported more than 1.8 million apprehensions on that border in the first 10 months of the fiscal year through August of 2022. As in years past, people from 4 nations, Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, make up most of the total, and many are quickly turned back around under a pandemic-related border rule called Title 42. But officials are also seeing a sharp increase in migrants from Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. And because of strained diplomatic relations with those countries, migrants cannot be expelled from the U.S. At Union Station, everyone we meet from the bus is Venezuelan, including 42-year-old Ramon Serrano Medina, his wife Gisveli, and their 2 children, Raizel and Gael, 9 and 2.
It's no secret what the situation in Venezuela is like. The lack of jobs, the lack of goods and things for our children. That's why I decided to come to the U.S. for a better future for our kids, for our family.
Their one bag holds a few kids' clothes and diapers. Everything else, they say, was abandoned or stolen along the way.
It was very, very difficult. It was a 2-month journey that I never really imagined would be this hard. You have to live it to know what it feels like.
41-year-old Jusveli says U.S. officials separated their adult son at the border. He's 23 with developmental disabilities and relies on her for care.
My hope is to continue holding on to my faith in God. I will never let go of that. I'm scared because we're in a country that's not our own, where we don't know anyone.
Today, we learned the family got word their son was released and is now trying to reunite with him.
So everyone here in this group is now going to be moved to what's called a respite center in a nearby Maryland city. They've got beds there, some food, they can take showers, and folks will stay there for a few days while they figure out their next step.
Experts say when offered a free bus ride to New York or D.C. from the border, many choose that option, even if they have no contacts in either city. Democratic mayors Eric Adams of New York and Muriel Bowser of D.C. have slammed Abbott's busing program.
You have a person who is using those who are seeking refuge in this country as almost political showmanship. He thinks that this is a theatrical performance, and it's not.
I fear that they're being tricked into nationwide bus trips when their final destinations are places all over the United States of America.
And Department of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says the program makes his agency's border work more difficult.
It is problematic, however, when an official works not in collaboration with us, but unilaterally, and that lack of coordination wreaks problems in our very efficient processing.
Perhaps an unintended consequence, Abbott's busing of migrants may be easing their asylum pathway. Data from Syracuse University shows that in the last 10 months, judges in Houston approved only 17% of asylum seekers. In Dallas, only 33%. But in the same time period, New York courts have approved over 80% of asylum relief applications. At a church in Northeast D.C., single men from the bus get a fresh sandwich, new shoes if needed, and a brief rest. Volunteers will try and find them a rare spot in city shelters.
Okay.
Jessica Cisneros is a volunteer with a mutual aid group supporting migrants.
Anything else I can help you with?
Like what?
And then his associates, and I think even by the standards of Trump God, that was maybe a grift too far.
Yeah, and let's go on to this other big development that happened today, and that is, of course, that the Justice Department has now appealed this decision by, speaking of Trump world, Trump's the judge who seemed to be very much on Trump's side. So the Intelligence Committee's review, this is the appeal. The Intelligence Committee's review and assessment cannot be readily segregated from the Department of Justice and FBI activities in connection with the ongoing criminal investigation, and uncertainty regarding the bounds of the court order and its implications for the activities of the FBI has caused the intelligence community, in consultation with the DOJ, to pause temporarily this critically important work. Moreover, the government and the public are irreparably injured when a criminal investigation of matters involving risks to national security is enjoined. So the Department of Justice is trying to basically get this lawyer, this judge, to enjoin her own order and to pause it. Charles, I'll start with you. I mean, it doesn't seem like there are a lot of chances of doing that, but what do you make of the appeal?
Well, Joy, when you are a private litigant, you are only concerned about the results. But however, when you are litigating in the interest of the public, you can be concerned about the results and the rationale. And I think that in this case, it's not just the results of the order that the DOJ was alarmed by. It was the rationale that they could not allow us to go forward and not challenge with respect to an appeal. And that rationale is laid out very clearly, I think, in a well-written appeal on behalf of the DOJ. They basically said, look, you have bifurcated this case into somehow separating the criminal aspect from the investigative aspect without any regard for the national security implications. You can't do that. Like, that is a big issue. And I think that they laid it out, not to mention that you have extended a level of discretion around executive privilege, which, number one, should not exist, and number two, there's no precedent for. And so I think the DOJ understood that they could probably live with the results in the large scheme of things regarding a special master, in as much as the FBI has already gone through the documents, they know what's there. But it was the rationale that they had to challenge, because if this were to remain on the books as standing law, as precedent for future endeavors, you never know where this could lead. And so I think it's that was what pushed it over the edge. And I understand why they made the appeal. And I honestly do think that they may have a shot in some respects of getting that injunction.
And, you know, Hugo, what's the thinking either at the DOJ side or in the Trump world side? Because, you know, there are a few things that the Trump side didn't do. They never claimed executive privilege. Now, the question is, are they now going to do that? Are they now going to try to assert something that they can't have because these aren't their documents, and sort of start making the claims that it did feel like Judge Cannon was trying to prompt them to make? What is the thinking now on how they go forward? And do they start making some of the claims she seemed to be teeing up for them?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point you're making about how the judge in this case effectively made the arguments on behalf of Trump's lawyers. If you look at the original filings from Trump's legal team, they're very muddled. You have kind of invocations of attorney-client privilege, and then in a separate filing, they were just talking about privilege generally, like they were just going to assert privilege over these documents, and that would be it. In terms of
tonight.
And well, I think it's important we're showing the video of them horseback riding. It just shows that these weren't just cursory relationships in many cases, right? That these were deep personal connections. And Van, President Obama flew to the Queen's castle in 2016 to help her celebrate her 90th birthday, right? So at this point, you're at a very different generation, right? She would have come in young. She would have been the same age as say, Ronald Reagan, and now here she is. He was so young compared to her. And here's some of what he said after a meeting with her.
The Queen's been a source of inspiration for me, like so many people around the world. She is truly one of my favorite people. She's an astonishing person and a real jewel to the world, and not just to the United Kingdom.
Very, very genuine, Van.
Yeah, and he even compared her at one point to his grandmother, which, of course, no higher praise than that from anyone, but certainly no higher praise than that for President Obama, who loved his grandmother so much and who stood in the breach for him when his own mother had passed away. Right. And you know, the Obamas were just starstruck. You saw him struggling for words. When do you ever hear President Obama struggling for words?
Exactly.
But that's the impact of her. And she's, you know, this small person. Apparently, I never had the chance to meet her, but everybody says, but this huge presence and this grace and this dignity and this regal quality that's just really rare. And you know, it's clear that there'll never be another queen like that. You know, that kind of a reign. And I think everybody around the world is. I mean, people watching TVs, Republicans, Democrats, united, tonight in remembering somebody who's been with us our whole lives.
Well, there are so few things that people can feel that way about, people with such very different points of view now, and this highlights that. I mentioned her sense of humor, David, and it sort of stands out. The last president that the Queen visited the White House was George W. Bush, and he made a bit of a gaffe when he was welcoming her, and she responded to it a day later.
The American people are proud to welcome Your Majesty back to the United States, a nation you've come to know very well. After all, you dined with 10 U.S. presidents. You helped our nation celebrate its bicentennial in 1976.
Mr. President, I wondered whether I should start this toast saying, when I was here in the 1770s.
David, we hear about her sense of humor again and again and again, and it seems all the more powerful because of the package in which it was contained, right? You don't look at her and think that she's going to be, throwing a joke out there like that, and yet she did.
Yes, I think that it was a remarkable combination because she understood that a leader, must be serious. There must be a serious undertaking, and she was devoted to her country, to advancing her people. But at the same time, her humor made her seem a little more lighthearted, and she was more relatable. And the various shows that have been built up on television now, I think often capture some of that humor and the sarcastic occasional repartee.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you both so very much. I appreciate it. And I hope that you will all watch tonight the special report, A Queen for the Ages, with Max Foster, who has covered her for so many years. That is tonight on CNN at 10 o'clock. And next, the Department of Justice, a federal judge's decision to grant Trump's request for a special master. They said it was urgent, and they have filed it. The details are next.
Security. If you're
Okay.
what they like. Our US-based
This extended
Point of sale is on point.
switch to Verizon.
occurred. Tell your doctor if
Cheeks like this. I will demonstrate.
So we go to this meeting, and this meeting is telling us that we had better.
if you forest baths.
All right, welcome back along with Scotty Lynn to wrap it up.
Ball. Close football.
You kind of
Boost she needs it.
TED.com.
About our treasure hunt that
To find out if you're eligible for financial compensation, call 1-800-700 with hazardous toxins. The toxins found in the water at Camp Lejeune may cause cancer.
I'm not sure the amount of.
Completed her first 15-minute lesson.
More natural gas and oil made in America.
Celebrate the heritage of traditional and contemporary American Indian art at the 33rd Annual Northern Plains Indian Art Market, September 24th and 25th at Hilton Garden Inn in downtown Sioux Falls. NPIAM.org.
Friday at 8, 7 Mountain on South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
On Masterpiece Mystery.
Tell me what you've done, or I'll get those men over there to kill you and then your brother.
You can't let him walk for the sake of a few more years for Roy. I want Roy to go in there and never come out.
She's been behind everything they've done.
Now we flush her out.
But they know what you're doing.
And I know what they're doing. So it's a race. What have you done?
I don't want it to end like this, but it's the only way it can.
Guilt on Masterpiece Mystery.
Sunday at 8, 7 Mountain on South Dakota Public Broadcasting.
Greetings from Dakota Life in winter. While our commitment to keeping you informed has never been stronger, it's good to get away from the drumbeat of news and take a closer look at the world around us. SDPB brings you stories of our home here in South Dakota, the people, the places, and the things that we enjoy today, plus our heritage and our history. SDPB provides reliable information to help keep you safe, but also connects you to the stories that celebrate how we live. But that's not the only difference. The funding for the programs that make all of this work comes primarily from you, through your donations and your sustaining support. We've always supported each other, bringing you news and sharing stories and events and exploring the world around us. So please help us plan and grow by becoming a sustaining member and receive SDPB Passport as a thank you for your donation. Already a member? Check to make sure your passport service is activated. Thank you.
At least put a pause on her order, which was an injunction essentially preventing the FBI from having access to the documents that were seized when they conducted the search at Mar-a-Lago.
After 9/11, she changed hundreds of years of tradition and ordered the Star-Spangled Banner played during the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. And they have done so on every 9/11 since at her order. Marnie, you know, they say life is about instincts, and for 70 years as the monarch, her instincts were spot on.
Right.
Can't fake it.
And constant, and to duty that she served, Leland. I think that is why so many respected her, honored her, and today they remember her for those moments that you just shared. Thank you for that tonight. Stick around. It's time for Prime.
The show, Tucker's next. I'm Waters, and this is my...
On All In.
Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Good evening. It has been a momentous day. Looking at live video from outside Buckingham Palace and the crowds that are still there at 1 a.m. local time. Hard to overstate the magnitude of this moment. In the entire history of the British monarchy, Elizabeth II, who died today at age 96 after 70 years on the throne, was the longest reigning queen or king ever. It is also impossible to overstate the void that people in Britain are feeling tonight at the loss of the only monarch most have ever known. Her reign spanned 15 British prime ministers, 14 American presidents, 7 popes, the end of the Soviet Empire, the decline of her own, and its rebirth as modern Britain. The people you see there outside Buckingham Palace and gathering elsewhere as well, Windsor Castle, have been gathering since this afternoon in the rain on word that the Queen at Balmoral Castle in Scotland had been put under medical supervision. The arrival a short time later of royal family members at Balmoral only underscored the gravity of the hour and the family's single-minded response to it. The image of 2 of the Queen's sons, Prince Andrew and Prince Edward, Edward's wife Sophie, and Prince William at the wheel, all together in the same vehicle. From a sometimes contentious but always message-conscious family, the message this image sent was clear. Then the clouds began lifting. Rainbows formed outside Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. They signaled hope but delivered only sadness just a short time later. The news coming in a simple message behind a humble frame in keeping with the quiet power the note conveyed. It read, "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon. The King and the Queen Consort will remain at Balmoral this evening and will return to London tomorrow." People grew quiet at the news until a refrain was heard that had not been sung since the time of Elizabeth's father, George VI.
God save the King, send him victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the King.
That's spontaneous.
Rhodesia became Zimbabwe and then became the poorest country on the planet under the racist lunatic Robert.
The Queen remained at Balmoral, where she's been most of the summer. She has been suffering from what Buckingham Palace has called episodic mobility problems since the end of last year. She was instructed to rest yesterday. Then this morning, after further evaluation, the Queen's doctors expressed concern for Her Majesty's health. Prince Charles, Camilla, and Princess Anne were already at Balmoral, but other senior members of the royal family were summoned. Prince William was spotted driving his uncles, Andrew and Edward, with Harry, in England for an event, arriving at Balmoral later in the day. Their wives, Kate and Meghan, were not present. It was 6:30 local time when the news first broke.
We have some very important news. Buckingham Palace has just announced that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has died. She was 96 years old.
As is tradition, a bulletin was posted outside Buckingham Palace, and in a modern twist, on all royal online platforms. Leaders from around the world and within Britain were quick to react.
Queen Elizabeth II created a special, personal relationship with us all. A relationship based on service and devotion to her country. Nobody under the age of 70 has known anything other than Queen Elizabeth II on the throne.
Crowds gathered to mourn their queen, the weather matching their mood. Rainy most of the day, until a double rainbow appeared over Buckingham Palace.
There'll never be anybody like her ever again.
For so long. I mean, I know Charles now, he's king, isn't he?
It's quite upsetting, really. You know, just that feeling in your stomach, you don't really know what to say. So, just can't really believe it, to be honest, because she's been obviously queen my whole life, so just what's going to happen now, really.
And while many spent the day looking back, the country's new prime minister ended her public address looking forward, as she said the Queen would want, ushering in a new era.
God save the king.
When dawn breaks and the first beams of light cross the Union Jack, there will be a new ruling monarch in the UK. King Charles III is set to address his people at 6 o'clock local time tomorrow. He released a statement earlier today which read in part, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of great sadness for me and all members of my family." He and Camilla, who is now the Queen Consort, remain in Balmoral tonight. They're set to return to London tomorrow morning for Charles to make that speech. Mourning.
All right, Paul Gerke tonight. Paul, thank you. President Biden and the First Lady paying their respects tonight as well at the UK Embassy in Washington, D.C., where the president signed a condolence book calling the Queen a great lady that he was delighted he got to meet. Correspondent Kelly Meyer joining us live from our nation's capital. So, Kelly, the tributes pouring in from leaders really all over the world.
That's right, and it's truly incredible the impact she had here on U.S. politics. She met with nearly every president in those 7 decades that she was on the throne, every president except for LBJ, from Truman to JFK, Trump to Biden. She was that one constant in the revolving door of U.S. politics, maintaining a strong relationship between the U.S. and the U.K., offering advice, friendship, and always a cup of tea.
Profound sadness. I'm approaching 60, Tucker. She's been there for all of my life. You've got to be 75 to even remember a time when she wasn't the Queen of Great Britain, Northern Ireland, the head of the Commonwealth, and this gets forgotten. I heard what you said about the empire. You're quite right. Not only was it a benign empire, but it's the only example in the history of mankind where the colonies of a former so-called impressor joined together in a club which we call the Commonwealth, that has 2.3 billion people within it. So I am profoundly sad for what's happened today. I have to say, when I heard the news this morning she was ill, I felt sick to the bottom of my stomach. And I went along tonight to Buckingham Palace to lay some flowers and pay my respects. And you know, there may be some in academia, there may be some writing for the New York Times that want to sully the memory of this great woman. But I would argue that today has passed not just the most famous person in the world, but probably the most admired and respected person in the world. She was the Queen for people from countries from all over the world, respected, loved, and something has gone today, something about honesty, integrity, duty, service, dignity, Christianity, and patriotism has gone, and I regret to say, I doubt we will ever see the like of her again.
Served in the government, and your reflection personally on this day and the legacy of the Queen.
The Queen's been there for all my life, and for 90% of Brits, they've never known anything else. And when people talk about a symbol of unity, a symbol of continuity, that's what we all remember, that's what we've all looked up to in various ways. She had this remarkable ability to put people at ease. One of the things you do as Foreign Secretary is all overseas trips that the Queen makes, you accompany them with her. Every overseas trip that I made, I would go and see her beforehand and talk about things. And she had this remarkable ability, even when you went in trepidation, it felt like the first time it was going to be the worst exam I'd ever been through. She puts you at ease, and even though she could tell you about who was the Prime Minister of Pakistan in 1961 and what he'd told her, my first visit to Pakistan, I went to see her beforehand, she had this great ability to put people at ease, and I think that helped the country, however divided it was politically. And there's this interesting fact about a constitutional monarchy. The monarchy symbolizes unity, but it legitimizes political division, and that's part of the secret of success, I think.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that relationship, because it's so fascinating to me, right? I mean, you are a member of an elected government, right? You're the actual part of the government that's actually, running the country. Of course, the Queen is there as part of the constitutional order of the government that you are representing. There's this obviously ceremonial awe you have for her as a Brit yourself, but what is the nature? Describe to me the nature of that relationship as a foreign secretary going to talk to the Queen.
Well, obviously there are all sorts of aspects to it that are very peculiar. To be appointed a minister, you are Her Majesty's Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs. You have to go and quote unquote kiss hands. They tell you how to kiss a hand. It's to lightly brush the top of her hand. So there are some things that can be seen as absurdities. But there's also the point that you're there to represent a particular political point of view. And what's striking is that whether you're on the left or the right, whether you're a Scottish nationalist or a Republican or whatever, that political division is respected. And she was someone who would never leak. You can't find a single record of a conversation that she had had. She'd known American presidents for 14 years, 14 American presidents, 15 UK prime ministers. Why do they all come out today and talk about what a remarkable relationship they had with her? Because you could say anything to her and you'd know it wouldn't go any further. You could seek her advice, you could seek her counsel if necessary.
There's also, there's something fascinating.
Long live the king. Sharon Osbourne is joining Fox soon, by the way, as a host at Fox Nation, and we are happy to have her tonight. Sharon, thanks so much for coming on. What a sweet and heartfelt series of lines that was. That reflects how you feel, obviously.
Absolutely it does. I had the honor to meet the Queen many times. Look at the woman has gone through in her life. She swore her oath to her country. She has never put a foot wrong. She has put up with so much, and there is nothing bad anyone could ever say about the woman.
In many, many parts of the world, that is not a modern institution, even though here it was a constitutional monarchy reigning over a full democratic process.
Max, Cristiano mentioned the continuity, even the Queen dying at Balmoral, a house which was bought by Prince Albert for then Queen Victoria, his wife, from one generation to the next. The real estate of this family remains the same, the importance of that place for the Queen. Can you just walk us through, Max, a little bit about, you talked a little bit about what will happen over the next several days. You said King Charles is expected to make a statement tomorrow, and then the funeral plans for the Queen.
So what will happen is, this is the delicate tiptoeing here, is this is about remembering the legacy of the Queen, as Christian suggests, one of the great queens, arguably the greatest monarch ever. So that's what a lot of the focus will be, but it also has to be about looking ahead to the King Charles monarchy as well. So you'll see that alternating from day to day, the tone changing and reflecting one or the other. King Charles, I expect to travel around the United Kingdom, seeing the different nations within the UK. There will also be reflections on the Commonwealth, reflecting that he will be a monarch in 14 other countries as well. Balmoral is a private estate. They're all there at the moment, the family together, putting their differences behind them. Prince Harry's up there with other members of the family as well, and that would be very heartening to the Queen, I think, to see, in particular, William and Harry coming together at Balmoral, which is, of course, where she comforted them when they heard about their mother Diana's death. So that is a very comforting, safe space for them. I think the difficult moment will start tomorrow when they have to leave Balmoral and come to London and move on, not entirely, of course, from their personal grief and family grief, to addressing the national grief. And this is the great challenge of any monarchy. They aren't just a family, they belong to the nation as well, and they have to share themselves with the nation as well. So I think we'll see Prince William, who's now known as the Duke of Cornwall and Cambridge. He'll also have a high-profile role over the next few days, bringing the nation together. Prince or King Charles will be expected to bestow the title of Prince of Wales to Prince Charles, so Kate will become the Princess of Wales as well. We'll see all of this play out over the next few days as we transition over a period of about 2 weeks to a new monarchy in tumultuous times, as you described so eloquently at the top of the show. This is a country in economic chaos, some political chaos as well, because there's a new Prime Minister who's untested in terms of mandate. It's going to be a big test for the UK and a huge test for Prince Charles, King Charles as he is now, to try to bring everyone together. That's his duty.
Christian, before she was queen, when she was a 21-year-old princess, she said on a broadcast that was heard around the world, quote, "I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service." It is remarkable to hear that now, given what we know of, thankfully she had a very long life, but it was a life completely devoted to service.
Anderson, there's no doubt about it, which is why she's so universally respected. Even if a monarchy in today's world may be somewhat anachronistic, in this country, it was put to work for the people, for Brand Britain, for the business of Great Britain. It was also, in other words, not just a gilded family on a gilded, in a gilded life, but it was really Britain. It was Brand Britain. And she being at the center of it and being almost irreproachable in terms of her own conduct, her own devotion, her own professionalism. I mean, let's just face it. She had a job to do and she did it. She was a professional. She was a working woman and she absolutely made that monarchy respectable and respectful, to the extent that people are calling in, to any Brit they know from around the world and offering condolences as if it was our own family member who had gone. But it's not that. It's that everybody sort of wants to reach out. In France, for instance, which has had its years and years of history, war, peace, and even now since Brexit, you go back to that sort of inherent kind of competition there. President Macron has announced that some flags over public buildings will be held at half-mast, that the Eiffel Tower has been turned out in respect and in condolences. People like the Prime Minister of India from the country that was so huge in terms of the British crown, the jewel in the crown, until it created its own independence in 1947. He also sent a message, and I think I said it earlier many hours ago. Incredibly, Narendra Modi talked about the handkerchief, the cotton handkerchief that the Queen showed him recently on a state visit, that she had been given as a young woman by Mahatma Gandhi, the father of Indian independence. I mean, it's just, I can't even believe I'm saying those words. Yeah, the Queen has lived out all those people. Imagine that. 14 American presidents, and presidents and kings and leaders all over the world.
Well, also when she got off the plane from Kenya, Winston Churchill was one of the people greeting her.
Her first prime minister. Again, imagine that. She came of age in the most cataclysmic period of history in the modern era, the Second World War, lived with her parents in Buckingham Palace, which was also at one point a target of the Nazi, the Luftwaffe, and Britain and London was not spared. The Blitz, 6 years of this, we think some of the crises we have to endure right now are hard. 6 years of that. It was her family that kept this country together, and it was Churchill that kept the spirit of the Allies and certainly this country together to victory. And the Germans have paid tribute to that, by the way, to her role in keeping the two countries reunified after that period.
Yeah, there will never be another like her. Christian Amanpour, Max Foster, thank you. More now on the idea of monarch as matriarch. It is, after all, the royal family, and for 70 years, Elizabeth II was at the head and the heart of that family. Randy Kay has more.
She was the Queen of England and the head of the Commonwealth, yet those weren't Her Majesty's only titles. Queen Elizabeth II was also a mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. She had 4 children with her husband, the late Prince Philip, 3 sons, including Prince Charles, Prince Andrew, and Prince Edward, and 1 daughter, Princess Anne.
Returning home, the young couple were reunited.
More than 70 years ago, in 1948, her first son, Prince Charles, was born. 2 years later came Princess Anne. 3 years would pass before she was crowned Queen Elizabeth. Life became rather busy for the monarch.
Today is another landmark, because television has made it possible for many of you to see me in your homes on Christmas Day.
She waited more than a decade after becoming queen to have more children. Her 3rd child, Prince Andrew, was born in 1960, and the youngest, Prince Edward, arrived in 1964. Charles, who will now be king, was the first royal heir to earn a university degree. He later served in the British Royal Navy and became a helicopter pilot. He married Diana Spencer in 1981, and the couple had 2 sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. They divorced in 1996, long after the Queen had reportedly received word of his affair with Camilla Parker Bowles, whom he later married. Still, in 2018, the Queen declared it was her sincere wish that Charles be the future head of the Commonwealth. Princess Anne, whose official title is the Princess Royal, reportedly bonded with her mother, the Queen, over their love of horses. Anne was the first British royal to become an Olympian, competing in the 1976 Olympic Games as an equestrian. A couple of years before that, in 1974, she was the target of a failed kidnapping plot.
I think, public figures have always been in danger to some degree.
She went on to marry twice and have 2 children. Her son Peter was born in 1977 and